Hello out there, and today we're going to be talking about CRKT and specifically the things that I would do if I were the CEO of that company. What ideas I would implement to make the company better, what changes I would make, just what my strategy would be for building that brand and taking it into the future. And this is an idea that I've had first for CRKT, but it's one that I want to do for a number of other companies if this video works out. So let me know down below which company you'd like me to talk about next, or what kind of feedback you have when it comes to the format. All right. But getting into CRKT, this is a company and a brand that I have been a big fan of since some of my earliest days collecting knives. You know, CRKT with their innovation and some of the very cool and unique things that they do was just very appealing to me when I was very new to the community. And they've stayed appealing because of the great designs that they have, and they just continue to be innovative every step of the way. But I know that there are some people who aren't very big fans of them, and there are things that I think that they could do better. And so, yeah, this isn't really going to be a rant about things they do wrong, but it's just going to be my take on what I would do to get them to the next level. And so let's get started with it. And number one is not going to be the thing that a lot of people always say first when they are upset about CRKT. It's not going to be about the steel. It's not going to be getting rid of 8CR13 MOV. Instead, my way to sort of combat that same issue maybe of having like lower quality materials and all these import designs is to create a domestic made knife, a USA made knife. And I know that since CRKT doesn't really manufacture knives at all, and they are in the minority in the knife community in that regard, it's going to be a difficult thing to do. It would have to be outsourced, but I think it's something that can be done. You know, it's just odd to have a company like this that isn't manufacturing knives of any type. You think about Benchmade or Spyderco. Kershaw has knives that they make here in the country. Gerber does, and Buck, and just about everybody else. So I think CRKT definitely needs to get on board and have some USA-made knives. You know, all the stuff that they have is either China or Taiwan, or the higher-end limited edition stuff. That's coming from, I think, Italy. But USA would really be a big thing to help get some new customers on board and get some people who maybe wrote them off to at least consider picking up some of their products and giving them another chance. And I think the way to do that, the best way that I can think of to do that, is to maybe get involved with Millet, if that is something that would be possible. And again, this is just me like having an idea and throwing it out there. I don't know if it's even remotely a plausible thing, but if I were CRKT, if I were running the company, I would try to make a deal with Millet, because one of the best CRKT knives in recent memory was designed by the same designer who designed some really good stuff that Millet makes. And Millet is a company, I believe, based in Idaho, and I might be wrong there. But they have a really popular knife called the Torrent, which is designed by TJ Schwartz, the same guy who designed the CRKT Caligo or Caligo. And no, I'm never going to settle on a pronunciation of this knife, no matter what anybody says. It's either the Caligo or Caligo. I'm not sure. But TJ Schwartz designed this one. He also designed the Millet Knives Torrent. And through, you know, my experience this past year with Mass Drop, it's been proven that, you know, Millet can get a knife outsourced to them and produce it really well. You know, the Mass Drop Perpetua, also designed by TJ Schwartz, was Mass Drop's, I think, one of their first forays into a USA-made knife. Most of the time, Mass Drop has been outsourcing to China, to the Wii manufacturers out there, and they went with Millet for the Perpetua, and that worked out really well. And so the same kind of rubric could be followed by CRKT in order to give them a USA-made produced knife. And that could be a version of the Torrent that's maybe a little bit more budget-friendly under the CRKT line. Maybe it could be an upgraded version of the Caligo, you know, with higher end materials and a premium USA made steel. But ultimately what would happen in that scenario is you would have that domestic made knife that has higher end materials than what CRKT usually puts out. It's made in the USA. It gives people an opportunity to come to CRKT for a different reason. Let CRKT flex its muscles and show what it can do. And, coming back to that whole argument against the 8CR and why I'm sort of not going to try to force out that steel and all those import knives is I don't really have a problem with them with Kershaw. Kershaw does a lot of budget knives, a lot of import knives with a lot of cheaper materials, but they do have the really good quality USA made stuff as well in the bare knuckle and the dividend and in the link and in all of their autos. Those are all made in the USA with better quality materials, and that sort of creates that balance, and it keeps that appeal that some people have, even if they're not going to buy the budget stuff, that they are going to be interested in what the USA made stuff is. And I mean, this bare knuckle is a perfect example of that at the $65, $70 price point, just an excellent knife. And that's something that CRKT should be shooting to replicate, to do for themselves. And there's no reason why they can't, as long as they can find a manufacturer. All right, so that is the big one. That's the first thing that I would do. And the next thing, sort of springboarding from that, is finding a flagship knife. Now, maybe this whole outsourcing USA made thing doesn't work out, but what they really need to do is create an identity, I think, with a number of the designs that they have. Maybe CRKT does not have manufacturing capability. Maybe they don't have a lot of things, access to high grade steels, or a number of things that would benefit them that other companies might have. But CRKT always and will always have great designs in their library, just great knives, and they need to use those and capitalize off of those if they want to continue to stay relevant. And there's so many great ones that they could just continue to start making, like limited editions from, or new variations, keep them fresh in the minds of people. And here's a great example of companies that do that. All right, think about the Benchmade Mini Griptilian, and think about the Kershaw Leak. I bet you that the Benchmade Mini Grip that you thought of didn't look like this. And I bet the Kershaw Leak that you thought of didn't look like this. And the reason for that is that there are just a multitude of options of both of these knives out there, a ton of different variations that you can pick up. I mean, Kershaw, to their almost beyond credit, it's almost a nuisance the amount of leaks that come out in different colors and different finishes and different handle materials, liner lock, frame lock, new steel, carbon fiber, all that stuff. They're constantly doing stuff with this design in order to keep it fresh in people's heads, because it's a time-tested winning design. And guys, CRKT has those. They have a lot of those knives, and they're just not capitalizing on them. And what they should be doing to some regard is just forcing some of these things down our throats and giving us the opportunity to either start collections with certain models, or just keeping them in the front of our minds with some of the variations that they have. The best example that I can think of is the Ripple here. This is just an excellent model. And yes, CRKT did have a number of variations of this model, different colors, different materials, budget version, a little bit more expensive version, but then they stopped. And they shouldn't have. This should be one of those knives that every year we're getting a different type of something. This year it's going to be a bright blue frame with a black coated blade. Next year maybe we're going to do titanium. Like there should be stuff like this with the extent of excellent and innovative designs that they have that just sort of go by the wayside after time. And that's just disappointing, because there's so much greatness that they have had in the idea stage that most people don't even know about, because it happened 3 or 4 or even 5 years ago, and those knives are gone. To their credit, they do some good things with the Pilar right now, obviously with the larger one, and they've done a lot with the Squid, but the Squids that they've done are mostly limited runs. Think about it this way, and one thing that that maybe going to the next topic or just continuing on, why not make these customizable? Why not maybe instead of just coming out with a limited edition of, a G10 or limited edition of a carbon fiber, why not make these permanent and make them swappable? What I envision is something like, making a whole line of customized kinds of knives or customizable knives so that you can mix and match. You have a base model here in the squid that's like $20, right? If that. And you could have different colored removable thumb studs, different kinds of colored G10, different colored backspacers, where you could either just sell those pieces individually, or they could just have a ton of different variations where you buy a number of them and swap things out. Why not do stuff like that? Why not keep this stuff interesting? I mean, I've seen so many great mods and so many people doing stuff like this to knives like the squid already as it is. Like, why not do it yourself and make money on it and keep it more relevant, Come out with a number of different variations and make them all limited editions, and whichever one sells the best, just keep it going. Why not do stuff like that? I just don't really understand that. And in the interest of keeping things customizable, why not create on whatever flagship knife you're going to have, whether it's like the Ripple or something new that, this let's say you make that move with Millet or some other outsourced company. Why don't you come up with a clip that's going to use the same screw holes as a Spyderco, or that's going to use the same screw holes as a Benchmade, so that all of those like custom clips that are out there are going to fit your knife too. For me, this is just common sense. That's stuff that should just like be a natural thought that should be part of the process as it is. And it would just make things more appealing. And there's a lot of people that I know who are into knives who would eat stuff up like that. And people are looking for an excuse to get back into CRKT. And it's that kind of stuff that I think could start to draw people in. Just the ability to customize a really cool model and make it your own and do something different with it. All right. So moving on, the next really big thing that I would do, I would have to really reimagine the field strip campaign and that technology and the way that it's being used. I like field strip in principle. It's, again, an innovation, a very clever one that is very practical in a number of cases, but on this knife specifically, the CRKT Slacker, this is a great example of how I really don't like it. The Slacker is one of those knives that could have been that flagship. The Slacker is one of those knives that could have been an absolute home run and one of my favorite knives of the year. It's based off of an excellent design from Ken Onion, and it looks just as good as that that hand finished custom piece. This is very much a Slacker. Maybe different materials, but the design is there, and it is just a gorgeous knife, I think. But at the $80 price point, with budget steel and a pretty decent aluminum handle, but nothing special, what you've got to have in order to set this knife off is you've got to have awesome action. You've got to have IKBS, and this isn't bad. I mean, I got to give it some credit. It's not terrible action, but it's not what I expect for $80. Especially, when we're going to bring the bare knuckle back out, it's going to be more expensive than the bare knuckle with just about inferior everything. But what you're paying for is the field strip on an EDC knife where, for me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's not practical here. It's not necessary. What's necessary on a gents kind of carry lightweight EDC knife is just some high-end fidget factor kind of IKBS ball bearings. That's what I think, at least. And so if I'm in charge of field strip, I make sure that we use it, but we use it where it makes sense. Use it on the knives, the tactical ones, the military applications, the bigger ones, the ones where you can actually envision people using them in a scenario where they're going to get dirty, they're going to get mucked up, you're going to have to potentially take it apart and clean it on the fly. That's what this technology is good for. it's not necessary on something like this. And it just doesn't make sense to me. You know, if you're going to spend $80 on a pocket knife, like, get a Torx driver, dude. Like, should be able to use that. And that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to take this knife apart that way and have it like old school, I guess, because this kind of thing, it hurts the action, it hurts the rest of the build, and in this case, I look at it purely as a gimmick. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think so. On this knife, it's a gimmick when it should be something to accentuate a tool. And I just don't see it here. So again, I would reimagine that. And again, that would provide value too, because this knife, maybe without the field strip, should be sold at a much cheaper price too. So definitely something that I would completely rehash if I were running CRKT. And I definitely would keep field strip, but I would find it and use it in the right place. And at the very least, create an option maybe. If we really want to have it on the slacker, we've got to have it on the slacker. Create a slacker maybe in a different color that doesn't have field strip. So that somebody who wanted to pick up this knife and didn't want this option could have it in just a regular, like, standard configuration. All right. And then last but not least, what I really am a big supporter of is creating the best quality tool every time. And I think that if I were in charge of CRKT, I would invest in quality control and just making sure that every knife that left the factory or shipped from the factory or left my warranty department was absolutely top-notch all the time. You know, one of the big mantras, I think, of CRKT, at least from my understanding and the way that I see it, is that, you know, they're trying to create a very high-quality knife at a budget price, and one of the ways they do that is by using a more budget steel. You know, they're able to keep prices low in that way, but the expectation is that you get a high-quality knife at that budget price point. Again, just a cheaper steel. And some of the things that I've seen recently, it sort of hasn't tied into that all that well. And if we are going to run with cheaper steel, I want that level of quality to be excellent all the time. And again, on the squids, I'm talking about a $15 to $20 knife, but just about every squid that I saw for the first couple of years that they were out all had this like chipped backspacer. Tons of them. I mean, I had at least half a dozen with this backspacer that had just a nick in it, just some kind of flaw, you know, just didn't look good. And it's one of those little nitpicky things, and yeah, I'm not going to argue that point. It is nitpicky, but it's one of those things you look at and you're like, and it's just a small little negative, and it just is bothersome. You know, it doesn't affect the way the knife functions, but if I'm going to compromise on some of the other things, I want the rest of the knife to be as perfect as it can be. And I just think they need to do better. And so if I were them, I would invest in making sure that we do better. And if knives come back to the warranty department, we're going to fix them. And if things need to be like, if we need to instill some constant quality improvement the way that that Spyderco does, then we're going to do that. You know, I think there needs to be a little bit more dedication to stuff like that. And, you know, just some of the things that I've seen, like, and this is a higher end Pilar, but, you know, the lock bar tension and the rock that a lot of the Pilars have. This is one of the best models in years and years from CRKT, but, you know, it isn't without its issues. And this isn't stuff that I saw when I first got into to collecting their knives. And I don't want to be the guy who's like, oh, well, it used to be so much better. Like, that's not really me. You know, and it's really easy to be that person who just remembers a better time. But regardless of that, I think that a focus needs to be put on just making the product a better overall product to create value and keep the people who really like budget knives happy with the budget knives that they're getting. All right, guys, so that's the plan. It's a little bit long-winded, but I really appreciate you watching. Yeah, the plan, getting the flagship knife, doing something USA made, customizing and making, you know, limited editions that we can, you know, sort of make our own, and reinvigorating the field strip campaign, and then just improving the quality across the board. Those are the things that I would do to start out with that I think would push CRKT in the right direction. What do you think, guys? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let's have a talk about steel. Let's see, like, what would you really do if this were your company to change things that would propel it forward? You know, and any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, especially regarding this format, I'd be very interested to hear from you. So thanks very much for watching. Take care and have a good one.